Let's be realistic, Elijah. Candidates for this role usually come from Stanford or MIT, and honestly, I don't see you lasting 5 minutes in this company.
The words detonated in the room before Elijah could even settle into the chair. No warm-up, no handshake, no courtesy. Just an execution. Delivered with corporate polish and cruelty, sharpened by years of unchecked authority. Lauren Blake didn't blink after she said it, didn't flinch, didn't soften, didn't pretend it was a joke. She let the sentence hang in the air like she had just stated gravity itself, like it wasn't an opinion but a natural law. Elijah had somehow dared to violate by showing up. Elijah didn't drop his gaze. He didn't shrink. The only movement was a tiny shift of breath, a subtle tightening at the corner of his eyes, barely visible, but enough to show the hit landed. Lauren mistook his stillness for intimidation. She always did. It was her favorite mistake. He had walked into Helix Dynamics 10 minutes earlier, and the building had already declared its verdict on him. Not with words. Buildings don't need words. They have people, eyes, silence, judgment. Every step through the lobby cut through a corridor of stairs that followed him as if he had crossed into a space where he didn't belong. Employees paused mid-conversation. Security scanned his ID with suspicion thick enough to taste. Even the receptionist's smile felt like a warning rather than a welcome. He knew that look. "Are you sure you're supposed to be here?" Look. He had worn it on his skin for decades. He didn't belong in their minds. Not in this building. Not in this company. Not in this room. And that was exactly why he didn't ask permission. Lauren scrutinized him with the precision of someone disassembling a machine they assumed was defective. Her gaze dragged across his plain shirt, his modest shoes, his lack of branding. No statement watch, no sleek tech badge. Nothing that screamed pedigree. A black man in simple clothes walking into a senior engineering interview? The audacity offended her. She clicked her pen. Once. Twice. Each click landing like a small verdict. "Elijah Carter," she said earlier, letting his name roll with skepticism, as if she expected someone very different to walk in. "Your resume is ambitious." A pause. Sharp. Strategic. Almost too ambitious. That was Lauren's specialty, insults disguised as concerns, bias framed as professionalism. She didn't accuse him of lying. She simply implied it so directly the implication cut deeper than any accusation. He sat still, not passive, coiled. His posture was quiet, but his presence wasn't. People often mistook that for uncertainty. They never realized quiet could be sharper than noise. Lauren leaned forward, eyes narrowing as if trying to see the truth behind his face. As if intelligence had a look and she knew what it wasn't. "You sure you're not in the wrong room?" she asked. Not playful, not curious, a shove wrapped in a question. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Silence was its own blade. She circled him like a shark in business casual. "I'm looking at your background," she continued, "and, well, let's just say it's not typical for someone applying here." Not typical for someone like you was what she meant. The pause after background carried the racism her mouth didn't dare say directly. She didn't want a conversation. She wanted confirmation that her bias was correct. Lauren flipped through his resume, page by page, with the impatience of someone searching for proof of fraud. "Where exactly did you say you went to school again?" He opened his mouth. She sliced him off before sound could form. "We don't need a speech, just clarity." He closed his mouth. Slowly, deliberately. Her smirk flickered. She didn't like losing control of pacing. She resumed the attack. "We've had applicants inflate their achievements," she added. "I'm sure you understand why I'm thorough." Her eyes didn't ask a question. They issued a threat. Behind her, through the glass wall, Elijah caught the reflection of two junior recruiters watching the interview like a car crash. Eyes wide, breath held, waiting for debris. Lauren could feel the audience too. It fed her. She leaned in, lowered her voice into something colder. This role is for real engineers, people who've built at scale, people who've LED teams, people who've actually earned their place. She let earned bite. Hard. She scanned him again, head to toe, as if tallying every reason he couldn't possibly be what his resume claimed. You don't look like someone who architected anything groundbreaking. Another incision. No anesthesia. Outside the room, a security officer lingered. Lauren had called him in, just in case. Elijah noticed. She wanted him to notice. Another intimidation tactic. Another signal that people like him didn't walk into rooms like this without setting off alarms. Lauren straightened her back, pinned him with the final thrust. Let's be realistic, Elijah. Candidates for this role usually come from Stanford or MIT. Her lips curled, not a smile, a diagnosis. And honestly, I don't see you lasting 5 minutes in this company. The room froze. Not from fear, from the sharpness of impact. Elijah inhaled once, slow and measured, the way a man inhales before stepping into a fire he's already decided won't burn him. His eyes lifted, not pleading, not defensive, just focused, steady, unsettling. Lauren didn't recognize that look, but she would. Soon. Because beneath Elijah's calm was something she had no framework for. Something she couldn't classify, couldn't predict, couldn't control. A truth sharp enough to pierce her arrogance. A truth that was already moving, quiet and unstoppable. And it was heading straight for her. The hallway outside the glass room was no longer just a hallway. It had become an audience, uninvited, unfiltered, and hungry for a spectacle. Lauren had practically fed them the opening act, and the room was swelling with the kind of electricity that only forms when people smell blood in the water. Elijah sensed it, not from the noise. He didn't turn. He didn't need to. You don't survive decades of subtle, sharpened prejudice without learning to read the shift in AIR pressure when a crowd starts choosing a side. And this crowd had already chosen. They wanted him to fail. They wanted confirmation that their assumptions were right. Nothing fed bias faster than a room full of people waiting for a man like Elijah to prove their stereotypes correct. Lauren stepped away from the glass with the triumphant confidence of someone who thought she just secured backup. She didn't know she'd only secured witnesses to her own downfall. But arrogance rarely sees its own shadow. Behind the glass, Elijah watched her reflection. The stiff shoulders, the clenched jaw, the manufactured calm. Everything about her body screamed victory. She thought she had him pinned. She always pinned people like him before. Quiet applicants, minority candidates, anyone she could overpower with tone and presence alone. She mistook intimidation for truth. She mistook pushback for guilt. And now she mistook Elijah's silence for submission. Outside the glass, the whispers hardened into words. Is he in trouble? HR looks pissed. What did he do? He looked lost when he walked in, knew something was off. He's probably lying on his resume. The comments were knives, flying through the air with reckless aim. And then came the phones. Because in 2025, nothing humiliates faster than a live stream. A young guy in a hoodie lifted his phone and whispered, "Bro, I'm telling you, this is crazy. HR grilling this dude like he stole something." He angled the camera toward the conference room, capturing Elijah sitting straight-backed, silent, steady. That steadiness triggered another round of assumptions. If he wasn't defending himself, he must be guilty. His live stream title popped up. Helix Dynamics HR destroying this dude in real time. Within seconds, viewers poured in. He looks confused as hell. No way he's senior level. Lamau, he's cooked. Another DEI fail. Bro applied out of his league. Lauren glanced toward the hallway, catching a glimpse of the phones, and instead of stopping it, she straightened up. Her spine elongated, her chin lifted, her voice sharpened. She wanted the audience. She wanted Elijah's downfall to be public. She wanted the spectacle. She stepped back into the room and, without looking at Elijah, said, "Well, since you can't clarify your background, I've escalated this. A senior manager is coming in." Elijah exhaled, quiet, measured. The kind of breath a man takes right before stepping into a fire he knows won't burn him. Marcus Reed entered as if someone had summoned a human gavel. Stern posture, clipped steps, the expression of a man who believed process was a religion and Lauren was his high priestess. He didn't greet Elijah. He didn't nod. He didn't acknowledge him as a human being at all. He walked in with the cold efficiency of someone examining a malfunctioning device. "What's the issue?" he asked, eyes on Lauren, not the man being accused. Lauren folded her arms. His resume doesn't match his presentation. Presentation. The word didn't mean posture or speech. It meant skin. It meant clothes. It meant assumptions. Marcus scrolled through Elijah's resume on his tablet. "He claims experience with our core architecture. That's questionable." His tone wasn't suspicious. It was accusatory. Lauren chimed in. "And he refuses to give clear answers about where he learned this." Elijah looked at her. "I wasn't refusing," he said calmly, but Lauren cut across him instantly. "We don't need excuses." Marcus turned toward Elijah for the first time. "You understand only a handful of engineers know the details of our core system, right?" The implication was obvious. You're not one of them. You can't be. People like you aren't allowed in that handful. Before Elijah could respond, Lauren stepped closer, her voice dropping into a tone that pretended professionalism but bled hostility. "If you've inflated experience, just be honest now. It'll be less painful for everyone." Less painful. A threat disguised as advice. Marcus added, "Misrepresenting your background can get you blacklisted from the industry." Elijah's eyes sharpened at the word blacklisted. He'd been threatened with worse in his life. This was nothing new. Security shifted outside the door. 2 officers waiting, arms crossed, watching Elijah like he was a potential problem rather than a candidate. Their presence wasn't protocol. It was prejudice in uniform. Lauren saw them and felt a rush of validation. "Let's do this," Marcus said. "We'll ask a few technical questions. If you really know what you claim to know, it'll show." He didn't say, "Prove it." He said, "Show." As if Elijah were a performer. As if this were a circus. As if the only way a black man could belong here was by offering a show. Marcus fired the first question. "What's the failure handling threshold of the Vortex architecture when switching from synchronous to asynchronous batch modes?" A question engineered to crush him. Elijah didn't blink. He didn't hesitate. He didn't give them theatrics. "The threshold depends on the original load," he said, voice steady. "If your concurrent node saturation is above 80%, fallback triggers at 12 seconds. If it's below, it drops to 8. It's deliberately aggressive because your pipeline used to bottleneck during rollbacks." Marcus stopped writing. Elijah continued, like someone reciting a memory rather than guessing. "And it was a compromise. There was a trade-off between latency and stability, but stability won because your early versions collapsed under heavy packet loss during model updates." Marcus's pen faltered. Lauren's lips parted. Elijah waited. Marcus swallowed, the first crack in his certainty forming. Then he tried again, harder. "Explain the distributed training loop of the Helix Core AI and the reason for the dual optimizer switch." Elijah answered the entire system flow, from memory, with nuance, with invisible scars woven into the architecture itself. Not the way a student answers, not the way an employee answers, the way an architect answers. Every sentence he spoke twisted the room tighter, pulling the certainty out of Lauren's spine and replacing it with something colder. Doubt. Real doubt. The kind that burns. Lauren stepped back, her voice thinner now. How do you know all that?" Elijah looked at her the way a storm looks at the ocean. Patient, inevitable. He didn't flex. He didn't gloat. He didn't rush. He just lifted his eyes and asked the question that should have shattered the room. "Are you sure you understand who you're talking to?" The words weren't loud. They didn't need to be. Silence amplified them. Lauren's face tightened like she'd been slapped. Marcus blinked hard, as if trying to reconcile the knowledge he just heard with the assumptions he'd built around Elijah's presence in the room. But Elijah wasn't done. He leaned forward slightly, not aggressive, just closer, enough that the truth he carried in his voice cut with surgical precision. "You keep asking if my resume is real," he said, "but maybe you should ask yourself something else. Marcus felt his chest tighten. Lauren held her breath. Elijah asked, "Are you sure you understand me at all?" No one moved, not the recruiters in the hallway, still filming, not the candidates holding their breath behind their phones, not the security officers watching through the glass. Everyone felt it. The shift, the wrongness in their assumptions, the terrifying possibility that the man they tried to corner might not be a cornered man at all. Something was off, deeply off. And for the first time, Lauren felt it too. The tiniest fracture inside her confidence, the first seed of fear, because the man she thought she could break wasn't breaking. He was unfolding. Marcus's silence thickened the room. He wasn't blinking anymore. Lauren wasn't breathing normally anymore. The hallway outside wasn't whispering anymore. The uncertainty Elijah planted in the last sentence had settled in the room like smoke. Thin, low, unavoidable. But Lauren didn't let that silence live long. Insecurity, when cornered, doesn't shrink. It attacks. She snapped upright, pushed her chair back with a violent scrape, and pointed a harsh finger toward the door. "That's enough. Turner, get security inside, now!" Her voice trembled, not with fear, but with a brittle rage that forms when someone feels their authority slipping out of their hands. Turner flinched and darted toward the hallway. The two security officers, who had been waiting like props in a bad play, straightened up, cracked their knuckles, and marched toward the conference room door. Elijah didn't move, didn't shift, didn't even adjust his posture. Lauren noticed that stillness. It infuriated her. "I'm not playing games," she snapped, grabbing a thin stack of papers from the folder beside her. "You're done here. You're being removed from the premises for misrepresentation and unauthorized access to internal systems. Unauthorized access." The accusation hit the room like a slap, louder than her voice, sharper than her tone. Marcus's head jerked. "Lauren, hang on." "No!" She cut him off, voice slicing across his. "I'm filing a formal violation. He knew too much, information he shouldn't have. That alone is grounds for removal." Marcus hesitated, caught between the truth he just heard and the prejudice he'd been taught to trust. Lauren shoved the papers across the table toward Elijah. "Sign it." He looked down. A violation report. A document that, once signed, would label him a threat to company security. A document designed to end careers before they begin. A document used against people who never had power to defend themselves. Elijah's eyes scanned the bold black letters. Unauthorized knowledge of proprietary systems. Potential security risk. Forced removal from premises. Lauren tapped the page with a manicured finger. "Sign it." Her voice wasn't professional anymore. It was personal. Desperate. Cornered. She thought the paper would scare him. She thought the presence of security would intimidate him. She thought the hallway full of spectators would humiliate him into submission. She didn't understand that she was the one on the stage, and she had already lost control of her own script. Elijah lifted his gaze slowly. Lauren's jaw tightened at the patience in his eyes, a patience she couldn't break. "I said sign it," she repeated, sharper this time. He didn't reach for the paper. He reached for nothing. The door clicked open behind him. Security entered. 2 officers, tall, broad, rigid. They took positions on either side of Elijah, hands resting near their belts, close enough to communicate force, far enough to maintain the thin legal line between escort and assault. Lauren straightened, her power restored by the presence of uniforms. "You are being escorted out. Now." Elijah didn't look at them. He didn't even blink in their direction. His voice dropped to a calm, low register that sent a ripple through the air. "On what grounds?" Lauren scoffed. "On grounds of deception. You're not who you say you are. No one with your background," she hesitated, then pressed forward, "should know what you claim to know." Her implicit bias slipped through the crack in her professionalism. The room felt it. Marcus felt it. Security felt it. Even the hallway outside, full of phones pointed at the glass, felt it. But Lauren didn't stop. "Your behavior is suspicious, your resume is suspicious, and your knowledge is impossible, which means you either stole it, hacked it, or fabricated it. Either way, you're done here." She pushed the violation report closer. "Sign it." The live stream outside the glass exploded. TikTok comments flew across the screen. He's not even resisting? They're dragging him out? This is getting ugly. Bro's too calm. Something's off. Wait, why security? What did he do? Helix HR always on bullshit. Is this racism or what? Phones multiplied. Angles shifted. Someone whispered, "This is going viral." Another whispered, "They're gonna get sued." A woman whispered louder, "He didn't even raise his voice, and they called security?" The narrative, once controlled by bias, was unraveling. But inside the room, Lauren didn't notice. She was spiraling too fast. "Elijah Carter, you are hereby being removed from Helix Dynamics property for—" He interrupted her. Not loudly, not aggressively, not rudely. Just firmly enough to recenter the gravity in the room. "Lauren!" She froze, not because of the interruption, but because he said her name with a calmness she didn't deserve. He slowly turned his attention to the two officers beside him. Their hands stiffened. He lifted his palms slightly, non-threatening, open, a gesture of peace. Then he looked back at Lauren and delivered the line that would replay on 100,000 screens before the hour was over. "Before you take another step," he said softly, "I strongly suggest you review the founding personnel files." Lauren blinked. "What?" Elijah held her stare. "You're about to make a mistake your career can't survive." The sentence didn't shout. It struck. Lauren's face twitched, first confusion, then irritation, then a flicker of something bordering on fear. "Don't try to intimidate me," she snapped, but the edge in her voice wavered. "Security, remove him!" The officers took a half step forward. Elijah didn't move. His next sentence dropped with surgical precision, each word cutting through the air like a scalpel slicing through arrogance. "You called security to remove someone you never took the time to understand, someone you never looked up, someone whose name sits in a file you've never bothered to read." Lauren swallowed hard. The live stream outside crackled with new comments. What does he mean by files? What is happening? Founding? Like founder? Bro's talking with way too much confidence. Plot twist coming. I knew something was off about his calmness. Elijah leaned back in his chair, eyes never leaving Lauren's. "Go ahead," he said quietly. "If you're so certain, have them escort me out." Security hesitated. They weren't used to being addressed calmly. They weren't used to not being feared. "Or," Elijah continued, voice even softer, "you can check the records, the ones you've clearly ignored." Marcus's heartbeat kicked hard in his chest. Something in the way Elijah spoke, the cadence, the certainty, the authority, sent a chill up his spine. Lauren felt it too. "Are you trying to threaten me?" she whispered. "No," Elijah said. "I'm trying to warn you." The sentence hit harder than any threat could. Every phone in the hallway pressed closer to the glass. Every eye widened. Every whisper died. The officers didn't move. Marcus didn't breathe. Lauren's skin went cold. Elijah sat there, still, centered, unshaken. The only unmoving object in a room tilting toward chaos. "Check the file," he repeated. Lauren's throat tightened, and for the first time since he'd entered the building, Lauren Blake felt something she wasn't used to feeling. Doubt. One tiny crack. One seed. The audience outside the glass leaned in, because every person watching, security, managers, candidates, strangers online, felt it. Something is wrong, terrifyingly wrong, and whatever it was, Elijah knew it. And Lauren didn't. Yet. Take a moment to subscribe if you'd like to follow more life stories like this one. Your support helps keep the channel going. Lauren didn't move at first. It was the stillness of someone whose brain was suddenly trying to rearrange itself around a possibility it had never considered. A possibility she didn't want to consider. "Check the file?" she repeated, voice thin, cracking at the edges. "What file?" Elijah didn't answer. He didn't need to. His silence had already done more damage than any accusation could. Marcus glanced at Lauren, then at Elijah, then back at the violation report still sitting on the table like a bad joke. Something about Elijah's stillness, his certainty, gnawed at him. It was the kind of certainty people don't fake. A man bluffing would look away. Elijah didn't blink. Turner hovered nervously in the doorway, phone in hand, eyes darting between security and the hallway, where the live stream had now surpassed 3,000 viewers. And rising. Lauren forced a laugh, sharp, defensive, terrified. "You really think I'm going to fall for that?" she snapped. "Some vague threat that you're in the founding files? Please, you don't even—" She froze, because Elijah was reaching into his pocket. Not fast, not threatening. Just deliberate. Security stiffened instantly, hands flying toward their belts. Hey, don't move your hands like that," one officer barked. Lauren stumbled back, pulse skyrocketing. But Elijah continued the motion, slow, purposeful, like a man lifting a veil rather than drawing a weapon. When his hand came out, it wasn't holding anything dangerous. Just a card. Old, worn. Edges slightly frayed like it had lived in a wallet for many years. Elijah placed it on the table. No theatrics, no announcement. He simply set it down between them with a quiet finality that cut deeper than shouting ever could. Lauren frowned. "What is that supposed to—" Then she leaned closer, and the color drained from her face as if someone had pulled the plug from her bloodstream. Because on that faded piece of plastic was something she had never seen before but recognized instantly. The original Helix Dynamics logo. The first version. The one used before the company went public. Before it exploded. Before it became a titan. A logo that only existed on old badges issued in the earliest days. Badges given to founders. Lauren's breaths came in sharp, uneven cuts as she grabbed the card with trembling fingers. There, beneath the logo, was a printed name. Elijah Carter Founding Engineering Division, Team 1. Below that, as impossible as it was undeniable, was the handwritten signature of Thomas Keller, CEO of Helix Dynamics. Her knees softened. Her voice died in her throat. She spoke, but only AIR came out. Marcus's jaw fell open. Security froze mid-stance. The live stream outside erupted with comments flooding so fast they blurred into a waterfall of disbelief. Turner whispered, "Holy shit." Lauren stared at the badge like it was radioactive. This can't be real," she whispered. This is impossible." She looked up at Elijah as if seeing him for the first time. He sat exactly as he had from the beginning, silent, steady, patient. Not weak, not scared, just waiting. Where did you get this?" Lauren stammered. Elijah finally spoke, softly but with a weight that made the room contract. "It was given to me," he said. "A long time ago." Lauren shook her head violently. No, this has to be fake. You couldn't have been—" She choked on the word. She didn't want to say it. She didn't want to give it power. But the badge said it for her. Founder. She flung her gaze toward Marcus. "Say something." Marcus couldn't. His mouth opened, then closed. Nothing came out, because he saw the founding team list every quarter at the all-hands meetings. 6 names, always the same 6 names, but one of them had always been listed as E. Carter. Initial only. He never asked what the E stood for. Now he knew. Something inside Lauren cracked. "No," she whispered. No, this isn't." She didn't get to finish, because the conference room monitor lit up. Bright, loud, unavoidable. Incoming video call. Thomas Keller, CEO, founder, the name that could raise or demolish careers with a single sentence. The hallway outside screamed. Phones jerked up. The livestream count blew past 12,000. Lauren's hands shook so violently, she almost dropped the remote as she accepted the call. Thomas Keller appeared on screen, framed by the sleek office behind him. His hair slightly gray. His expression focused. His voice sharp. "Lauren Blake," he said. "What the hell am I looking at?" The camera angle captured everything. Elijah seated between 2 security officers, a violation report on the table, Lauren's pale face, and the old Helix badge lying like a confession. She stumbled into professionalism. "Sir, I can explain." "Explain what?" Keller snapped. Explain why my founding engineer is being surrounded by security in his own goddamn company." Lauren's breath stopped. Keller leaned closer to his camera, eyes blazing. "Elijah built our core architecture," he barked. "He was with me before Helix had a name, before we had funding, before we had anything. What are you doing?" The words slammed through the room like a wrecking ball. Security instantly dropped their hands. Marcus lowered himself into a chair like his legs had buckled. Lauren collapsed into hers. I didn't know," she stammered. He didn't, his resume?" "His resume?" Keller thundered. "He doesn't need a resume. He is the resume." The hallway exploded. Live stream comments blurred into chaos. "He's a founder." Lauren is done. "Oh my God, this is bigger than Marcus Williams. Twist of the year." I'm shaking. "This is going to CNN. Security, back off. Is this real?" Keller wasn't finished. "He stepped away from the public spotlight years ago," he continued. "But he still holds ownership in this company. He still advises on core decisions, and you," he pointed a finger straight through the camera, "you tried to throw him out like a trespasser." Lauren's vision blurred. Her mouth opened, but only a strangled sound escaped. I swear, I didn't." "You didn't bother to check," Keller snapped, "because he didn't fit your picture of who belongs here." Lauren's face crumpled. Marcus bowed his head in shame. Security stepped back so fast they nearly tripped. But Elijah didn't move. He simply watched it all unfold, quietly, like a man who had lived long enough to know exactly how every piece in this kind of scenario would fall. Keller took a steadying breath. "Elijah," he said, voice softening, "I'm so sorry. This should have never happened to you." Elijah nodded once, calm, controlled, painful in its dignity. Lauren began trembling violently. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I swear, I didn't know." And for the first time, she realized the truth. This wasn't just a mistake. This was a career-ending catastrophe. A twist that would circle the tech world before the day was over. Lauren's breathing became jagged, her chest rising in frantic little bursts as Keller's voice thundered out of the speaker. The humiliation was no longer professional. It was personal, public, and irreversible. Marcus looked like someone had amputated his confidence. Security had retreated to the wall, hands behind their backs, eyes cast down like schoolboys caught stealing. But Elijah still hadn't moved. He sat in the same calm posture he held since the moment Lauren tried to crush him. Except now, every eye in the room was locked on him. Fear, guilt, shame, awe. No one knew which emotion to feel, so the room drowned in all of them at once. Elijah waited until Keller's face frozen on the screen. The call had cut off abruptly, Keller likely rushing toward the floor himself. Only then did Elijah raise his eyes. And he began. Not with anger, not with yelling, not with the explosive reaction they all expected him to unleash. He began with a question. "So tell me," he said quietly, "what made you so certain I didn't belong here?" Lauren's throat closed around air. "Elijah, Answer the question." The sharpness in his tone sliced her excuse in half. Lauren swallowed. You didn't look like—" "Finish it," her voice cracked. "Like someone qualified." "Qualified," Elijah repeated. "Is that the word you want to use?" She nodded, trembling. He leaned forward slightly, not threatening, just close enough for truth to land with surgical precision. "Or," he said, "did I not look like someone you expect to be qualified?" Her silence was its own confession. Marcus stared at the floor. Elijah didn't give them time to regroup. "You judged me the second I walked in," he continued. "Not because of my resume, not because of my answers, not because of my experience. You judged me based on skin, clothing, assumptions." Lauren shook her head frantically. I swear I didn't mean—" Elijah cut across her words like steel shearing through fabric. "You didn't need to mean it." He held her gaze with a quiet intensity. "You just needed to act on it." Her lips quivered. He turned to Marcus. "And you're the lead engineer. The man supposedly responsible for technical accuracy. You never even gave me the courtesy of a greeting. You walked in assuming guilt, assuming fraud, assuming I was beneath the system you're protecting. Marcus's jaw clenched in shame. Elijah didn't let him speak. You believed her version of me before you heard mine. Marcus nodded slowly. You're right. Elijah's voice tightened. Not loud, but sharp enough to draw blood. You didn't question whether her judgment was biased. You didn't consider that she saw what she wanted to see. You didn't ask if she ever misjudged another candidate, or how many. Marcus's shoulders fell. Elijah flicked his eyes toward the security officers, and you two walked in ready to remove me without knowing what I'd done. One of the officers spoke, voice small. We were following protocol. Elijah stared at him. Protocol doesn't demand you assume a black man is a threat. The officer dropped his gaze. No one in the room dared to breathe. Elijah reached into the folder Lauren had shoved at him, the same folder she used to accuse him. He pulled out a sheet of paper from her own stack, a printed email. He laid it on the table, sliding it toward Lauren with 2 fingertips. Her eyes widened in horror, because she recognized it instantly. It was hers. She had written it 2 months ago. Elijah tapped it once. Read it. Lauren's vision blurred. Elijah, I didn't mean read it. Her hands trembled as she lifted the paper. She read aloud. We've got too many DEI candidates this quarter. We need to maintain standards. Keep an eye out for red flags, especially in applicants with unconventional backgrounds. The silence after it echoed louder than the words themselves. Marcus whispered, Lauren, what were you thinking? Lauren broke. I was under pressure, she sobbed. We were told to keep hiring competitive. I didn't mean race. Elijah's voice sliced her denial clean in half. You meant exactly what you wrote. She collapsed into the chair, face in her hands. But Elijah wasn't finished. He pulled out another paper, a printed evaluation sheet. Again, Lauren recognized it. The notes she wrote beside several rejected candidates. Not a culture fit. Feels rough around the edges. Doesn't look senior enough. Unpolished. And next to each name was a common link. Black, Latino, immigrant. She stared at the patterns with shaking disbelief. How did you get these? She whispered. Elijah looked at her with a calm that chilled the entire room. Founders don't lose access. Marcus exhaled like someone hit in the chest. Lauren froze. Security shifted. The hallway outside, still recording, lit up with new comments screaming across the screens. But Elijah didn't turn toward them. Not once. His focus was locked on the 3 people who had tried to collapse him under their assumptions. You didn't just question my resume, he said. You created a culture where qualified candidates never got a chance, where talent was filtered out by bias, where your personal discomfort became a barrier to someone's livelihood. Lauren's lip trembled. I was doing my job. No, Elijah said sharply. You were doing your prejudice. She flinched as if struck. He shifted his gaze to Marcus. And you enabled it. By trusting her bias more than my competence. By believing that her instinct outweighed my expertise. Marcus lowered his head. You're right, I failed. Elijah nodded once. Acknowledgement, not forgiveness. Then he turned his attention to the room as a whole. And his voice changed. No longer a scalpel, a hammer. You all put this company in danger, he said. Not me. Lauren looked up, shocked. What do you mean? Elijah leaned back in his chair, folding his hands. Let's talk consequences, he said quietly. The temperature in the room dropped. First, he continued, every second of what happened today is already online. Lauren's face collapsed. No. Yes. Elijah nodded. And the clip of you calling security on a founder, based on your assumptions, is already spreading. He turned toward Marcus. And your engineering credibility? You dismissed technical accuracy because it came from the wrong face. Marcus swallowed hard. Elijah continued. Second, when the stock market opens tomorrow, Helix Dynamics will take a hit. A publicized discrimination scandal against a founding member will trigger investor panic. Lauren shook her head violently. No, this can't. Stock could drop 8, maybe 10%, Elijah said calmly, which is billions in market value. Lauren's breath caught. Security looked sick. Marcus looked like he might faint. Third, Elijah added, your treatment of me wasn't a one-off. Your emails make that clear, which means this company is vulnerable to a class action discrimination lawsuit. Not from me, from everyone you filtered out. Lauren gasped. A class action? Elijah nodded. Yes, the kind that destroys HR departments and leads to individual liability. Individual? Lauren whispered. But the company will protect itself, Elijah said, voice flat. Not you. Her face went white. And finally, he said, leaning forward, let's talk legal consequences. Lauren's eyes filled with terror. If the courts deem your decisions malicious, he said, you don't just lose your job, you lose your savings, your retirement, your future. Her breath hitched so violently she choked on it. Marcus whispered, Elijah, please. Elijah turned his gaze toward the trembling woman across from him. For years, you held the power to deny people their livelihood, he said. People who never got the chance to defend themselves. Today, you finally understand what that feels like. Lauren covered her mouth to hold back a sob. Elijah let the silence simmer. Then he exhaled, all tension leaving his posture at once. But the single word snapped every head up. There is one way forward, Elijah said. Lauren's eyes went wide with desperate hope and crushing dread. His tone softened, but stayed firm. You have one chance, he said, not to erase what you did, but to repair some of the damage. She nodded quickly, tears streaking down her face. Anything. Tell me what to do. He looked at Marcus, then at security, then back at Lauren. You will publicly apologize, Elijah said. Not to me, to the candidates you rejected, to the people you wronged. Lauren nodded, crying harder. You will enroll in a program called Fair Hire America. He continued. You will undergo training on unconscious bias, discriminatory patterning, and equitable hiring practices. Lauren's sobs shook her entire body. I will. I swear I will. And after that, Elijah said, you will speak publicly every month for a year. Speak. About what? She whispered. About this, Elijah said. About your mistakes, your assumptions, your prejudice. Her face crumpled again. You will warn other companies, he continued. You will become the example that prevents this from happening again. Marcus whispered. And me? Elijah turned to him. You'll join her. Marcus closed his eyes and nodded. Security swallowed and looked away. The hallway full of live streamers leaned closer to the glass, breathless, because they all knew. Elijah wasn't asking. He was deciding. He wasn't reacting. He was correcting. He wasn't punishing. He was reshaping the culture of a company from the inside out. And this was the moment everything changed. The room didn't recover quickly. It couldn't. Lauren's breakdown, Marcus's shame, the security officer's guilt. Every emotion still lingered like smoke after a fire. And standing at the center of that smoke was Elijah, calm as a man walking out of a burning building he had already mapped a way out of. Keller placed a hand on the table, steadying himself, the weight of leadership visible in his clenched jaw. Elijah, he said, softer now. We rebuild from here. Your call. Elijah nodded once. Small, controlled, more powerful than shouting, and that was the beginning. Helix Dynamics didn't wait days. It didn't wait hours. It didn't wait for PR to craft a safe statement or legal to soften the blow. It moved the same day. Because when the truth hits hard enough, delay becomes a confession. The first target of reconstruction wasn't people. It was the machine that enabled them. The hiring algorithm, the invisible gatekeeper, the quiet enforcer of an unspoken status quo. Elijah stepped onto the engineering floor the next morning, surrounded by teams who stared at him like he was a myth suddenly made flesh. Not a ghost from the past, not a founder in exile. A reckoning. We're rebuilding the system, he said. No warm-up, no discussion, just a verdict. The old one isn't broken, it's biased, and biased systems don't fail quietly, they quietly fail people. Silence, thick, heavy. No one argued. He pointed at the current hiring engine on the monitor. You designed this to find the best fit, but fit is just a pretty word for comfort, and comfort is a pretty word for sameness. That's not hiring, that's cloning. A few engineers swallowed hard. We destroy the bias at the root, Elijah continued. We remove name, age, race, school, zip code. Every anchor of prejudice. We weight unconventional backgrounds. We surface talent the old system buried. Keller nodded from the back of the room. Do it. And they did. Elijah and a team of senior engineers tore down the recruitment engine and rebuilt it, not as a filter, but as a lens. One that illuminated brilliance instead of guarding doorways. Then came the Oversight Council. Not a PR band-aid, not a symbolic committee. Elijah designed it from scratch. Civil rights leaders, data ethicists, community voices, tech veterans, and internal staff. Not to review culture, but to enforce it. They had veto power, audit power, correction power. For the first time in the company's history, diversity wasn't a metric. It was a structural safeguard. Policies followed next, clear, blunt, unforgiving. Every interview panel needed 2 observers. Every decision required documentation. Every candidate received transparent justification. Every rejection could be appealed. No more gut feelings, no more culture fit, no more coded language hiding prejudice. Helix Dynamics didn't polish the old system. It replaced it. Because Elijah wasn't rebuilding a company. He was building a standard. But the most powerful transformation didn't happen in boardrooms. It happened in people. Lauren didn't disappear. Elijah didn't allow it. Accountability, he told Keller, is only meaningful if it leads to understanding. So she stayed. Not in power, in service. Her first public appearance came 2 weeks later. A dark auditorium. Rows of employees. Quiet tension. Lauren walked up to the stage, hands trembling so badly she had to grip the podium to keep them steady. Her voice cracked on the first sentence. I failed. She swallowed hard. I didn't fail a process. I failed a human being. I let assumptions guide me. I mistook discomfort for danger, and I projected my prejudice into decisions that affected people's futures. Her confession wasn't polished. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't rehearsed. It was raw. It was honest. It was necessary. People listened, some stunned, some uncomfortable, some deeply moved. Lauren continued, breath shaking at every truth she forced out. Bias doesn't need to shout to destroy someone. It can whisper. It can look professional. It can sound like good judgment, and I let those whispers steer me. Her talk went viral inside Helix, then outside, then across the tech industry. Within a month, Lauren was speaking at universities, conferences, HR panels, anywhere she could expose the mechanisms of unconscious bias using her own mistakes as the case study. She didn't become a hero. She became a warning, a necessary one. The security officers followed their own path, not disciplinary, educational. Elijah conducted the first session himself. You weren't trained to profile, he told them. You were trained to protect, but protection without awareness becomes oppression. They learned de-escalation, intersectional bias, systemic triggers, not from a textbook, from the man they misjudged. HR built new workshops around fairness, rooted in Elijah's philosophy. Equity isn't a policy, it's a practice. Departments sat in circles discussing the stories they'd never shared, moments they misjudged, times they stayed silent, assumptions they carried for years without noticing the weight. Helix Dynamics didn't become perfect, but it became honest. And that made all the difference. 6 weeks after the incident, the company gathered in the central atrium for a town hall. Employees filled every step, every walkway, every corner. Overflow monitors broadcast the event down the hallways. Keller spoke first, but everyone waited for Elijah. When he walked on stage, the room quieted in a way that felt less like silence, and more like reverence. He stood there, no slides, no teleprompter, no corporate gloss, just truth. 6 weeks ago, Elijah began, I walked into a room and was treated like a threat to a company I helped build. No bitterness, no theatrics, just the clean, razor-sharp honesty of a man who had survived something far bigger than one HR manager. And in that moment, I realized something. Bias doesn't need a reason. It needs an excuse, and excuses are easy to find when you're not the one being judged. A quiet shiver passed through the crowd. Bias doesn't always scream. Sometimes it smiles. Sometimes it sounds like concern. Sometimes it wears a badge or carries a clipboard, but it grows when left unchecked. He stepped closer to the edge of the stage. Truth doesn't need to be loud. It needs to be timely. He let the words settle. Fairness doesn't arrive on its own. You have to demand it, again and again, especially when it's uncomfortable. Lauren wiped tears from her seat in the crowd. Prejudice kills opportunity long before skill gets a chance to speak. But truth, real truth, saves people. And sometimes it saves entire systems. Some employees inhaled sharply. Others lowered their heads. Elijah's voice softened. We're not fixing a process. We're fixing a culture. And cultures don't change because of speeches. They change because people choose different actions tomorrow than they took yesterday. He scanned the room. You have that choice. He paused, letting the weight anchor itself in their hearts. And so do I. Then he delivered the final words, simple, sharp, unforgettable. This revolution started in a conference room. A murmur of recognition moved through the audience. And revolutions don't stay contained. He looked around the atrium. Justice spreads when people share it. Truth spreads when people protect it. Fairness spreads when people fight for it. He stepped back, and believe me, truth always finds a way to travel. The room erupted, not in chaotic applause, but in something deeper, something grounded, something unified, because every person there understood. This wasn't the end of a scandal. This was the beginning of a standard, a movement sparked by one moment of prejudice and extinguished by one man's calm, unshakable clarity. The company had changed, the people had changed, and somewhere in the city, on screens across the country, thousands were watching and learning. Not because Elijah shouted, but because truth, spoken at the right moment, becomes impossible to ignore. In the end, this story reminds us of one simple truth. Prejudice destroys opportunities, but courage and accountability can rebuild entire systems. Fairness isn't automatic. It's a choice we make every day. If this story moved you, hit like and tell me your thoughts, your experiences, or your lesson in the comments below. Your voice matters more than you think. Thank you for watching. And until next time, stay aware, stay brave, and I'll see you in the next story. If you're enjoying this story, consider subscribing to support the channel. It truly helps me keep creating more meaningful content like this.